Italy? Whiskey? Ah, Italy me! You could never unlock my secret. Oh no! Suddenly, don't leave me! Let's begin. Indeed.
All right, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you may be. My name is Brian, and welcome to Honey Badger Radio. This is the Fireside Chat, where we have good conversations with interesting people. So today we're going to be speaking to Dr. Chloe Carmichael, who is a clinical psychologist and USA Today best-selling author of like a lot of different books. One of them is what I thought was really interesting is Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters and How to Use It Fearlessly. She has been on Dr. Phil. She's been on Dr. Drew. For some reason, I tongue twisted Dr. Drew. But yeah, welcome to the show, Chloe.
Thank you. It's really truly great to be with you, Brian. It was fun to chat with you too before we came on.
Yeah, it's really neat that that you're even aware of who we are. I don't know, like I feel like we are just so out in the fringes, and it's weird when we get like the other last week I spoke to a guy who is an activist for East Turkestan that's trying to have like an issue with the Chinese government addressed. And I thought, how do you know who we are? so anyway, but thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it. You have a really great pedigree and background. So let me first ask, I guess, tell us a little bit about what you do and why where is it that we kind of like uh, are at cross purposes or like similar purposes?
Yeah, so I'm a clinical psychologist, and I guess I've always been really interested in independent thought. So I mean, I would think that right there is kind of an overlap. Um, but my interest in independent thought was a little bit more in the background until the pandemic. So prior to the pandemic, I did what was more normal psychologist stuff. Like my previous book was about the healthy function of anxiety, which is to stimulate preparation behaviors. And then during the pandemic, I started getting really uncomfortable with some of the stuff that was being said, or rather not said. Like in particular, the last straw for me was as a psychologist and as a mother, when the public was being told to just mask their kids, like even toddlers, for, months, days, years on end. And I started speaking up about it, even though I knew it was going to cause some real problems for me in terms of like media relations. Cause I, at the time, had a pretty big practice, like employing a dozen therapists and doing a lot of big national TV. But, and we all knew that TV wasn't gonna like that if I started talking about, like, that we shouldn't be masking kids. But I just it was like a kind of a mama bear switch flip, like, red line in the sand type of moment. I couldn't take it. I had to start speaking up about that as a public service issue. So I did, and, like, Dr. Jay Bhattacharya and different people picked it up, which was kind of fun. And it led to a lot of conversations that I wasn't having previously. I was holding a lot of stuff inside previously, stuff that I thought could, get me blacklisted from the media or hurt my, business or whatever. But after that, it was like something snapped. I started talking about that. And then I started talking about trans issues, like that, the fact that men can't become women. It still feels good to just say that aloud because, to be honest, I was afraid to say it aloud for a long time. And so all of this led to my new book, which is about the mental health benefits of free speech, because I think a lot of people feel like they have to keep stuff inside because it would just be safer that way. And hey, what's the harm if I just hold it back? And I even thought that way myself for a long time. And I finally realized it's truly better for us mentally, emotionally, socially, societally, if we just speak up. So that's why I'm here.
All right. Now when I speak to psychologists, I think it's great that I have this opportunity. One of the things that I think of, and this is also, I guess, in line with that, like you know, like speaking out, because there's sort of like this. I don't know. It's almost like a mythology that we have to live under, where there's certain things that are just completely like, like the conversation is done and dusted on. We can't bring this up again. And I think, yes, COVID kind of tried to like speed run that from the moment it started happening to like, not only were they were asking kids to mask up, but they were isolating them from their classmates. They had to stay home, or if they did go, they were in these like, I've seen pictures anyway of people in like little bubbles of their own little isolated spaces. And I wondered what were going to be the negative effects of that. And so one of the other things I think about is the men's mental health. And I don't know if you have talked a lot about this. I presume you did, because this is what you do, and you know who we are. And it looks like there isn't a lot of help for them, even from the American Psychological Association. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on the APA's guidelines on traditional masculinity for, what they call, I guess, pathologizing traits like stoicism and competitiveness. How do these kinds of narratives, would you say, impact men's willingness to seek help?
Yeah, oh, I am so glad that you brought that up. And yeah, I actually did talk about that some through PragerU. They did a documentary called something like Men and Masculinity or something. And I talked about the issue of toxic masculinity, or so-called, toxic masculinity. But yeah, it's a good documentary. And if you're a Daily Wire member, now you can actually get it through the Daily Wire app as well. I noticed they have some kind of a partnership with Prager, it seems.
Hmm.
But yeah, that's definitely something I talked about, is those ridiculous guidelines about, toxic masculinity. To be honest, it's all kind of embarrassing to me at this point, like being frankly a psychologist in some ways, because I feel like my whole profession has, disgraced itself with all this, incredible nonsense. And yeah, as you said, like pathologizing stoicism or competitiveness, or, I mean, and it's so weird too, because the same people that are telling us that men and women are like social constructs in the first place, but then at the same time, all of a sudden it becomes very real if we're talking about actual men, like then they have something to say about it. It feels so circular and soft. And as you said, they're not only, quote, what you said, not a lot of help. I believe they're actively harmful to men, and in counterpart, therefore, to women, because I've also worked with women that have felt, like there's something wrong with them, that deep down inside they have this desire to, like, be with a masculine man and make him a sandwich and enjoy motherhood and enjoy, being a wife. And so, robbing, society of masculine men obviously hurts men, but it also, I don't mean to like make women the victim here. I'm just saying it's not good for men or for women. It's really messed up. And
Yeah.
yeah, I have a lot to say about
There
that.
there seems to yeah, so there's definitely with the APA, and I guess there's I don't know if it's a lack of oversight or an unwillingness to look at, like different kinds of data, or conduct different kinds of studies that look at different, behaviors or other phenomena. But it does seem like it's going to create an inevitable contradiction, where they're trying to suppress a certain kind of masculine behavior, which is just normal for men. I mean, they pathologize it, they exaggerate it, they strawman it, right? They paint a picture of like a lumberjack that cuts down trees all day and slaps his wife around when she doesn't like make the casserole the way he likes it or something. But it ends up, the way that it's applied ends up just basically just tarring any kind of positive masculine behavior. And this does put women in a weird position because it they never say to women, okay, you have to make, like your choices for a mate have to fit within the new parameters that we have put men into, because they know if they do, women won't prefer that, because I think the average woman wants the average man, and that comes with average behaviors, if that makes sense, right? And the best thing to do is just leave people free to just decide what they want without pathologizing anything, so that even though they haven't explicitly attacked femininity, they do by extension when they attack masculinity, because women want men who are men, right? And so it's going to have that effect no matter what.
Yeah, and by extension, just like they have this reflexive reaction, it seems, to tear down or belittle or devalue masculinity. There's this, similar reverse thing of trying to elevate, really aggressively anything that's feminine. There's a man named Michael Anton who coined a really wonderful phrase called the celebration paradox. And what that refers to is that if you were, for example, to say, there's a lot more women on the judiciary bench these days. You find a whole lot more women. And so the, judicial system has become a lot more compassionate. It's okay to say that, just for example. But it's not okay to say, there's a lot more women on the bench today. And it has caused the judiciary system to be a little bit histrionic. Like you can only comment on a change that's been brought about, or, aspect of women, if it's positive. Otherwise, it's sexism. Whereas, of course, it's really totally unscientific, because either you're able to notice a change in a variable, such as the increase in the quantity of women, and then discuss changes and, results from that, or you're not. But to say you can only do it essentially if it's positive, and by the way, the same thing happens about race, right?
Hmm.
You can, and I remember being perplexed about this even in graduate school, that we would do these quote cultural sensitivity trainings, and I would have the same feelings about women stuff too, by the way. I would be like, well, why is there a women's affinity group but not a men's affinity group, right? Or, you know, it's just the whole thing, is it drives me nuts. And I spent so long, not talking about it, because especially as a student, I had a first of all, I think, like, a humble belief that, hey, I'm here to learn, and maybe these people know something I don't, like, I should learn from them. But then when I came to realize that I genuinely just simply disagreed with them, I still felt like I couldn't speak up, because it would, railroad me from getting my PhD. And then the same thing kinda happened a little bit with as I was trying to build my business and build media relationships. I was almost like the frog that gets cooked slowly. And then finally I jumped out of the pot. So
Yeah.
that's how it all happened.
So going back to the your sort of like story of how you got here, since you did write a book about confronting, like, not just like using free speech fearlessly, but also confronting anxiety, was that something that kind of came out of personal experience with that particular event?
Yeah, so not entirely of personal experience, except the personal experience of, running a big practice in New York City, where there's a lot of people that are very anxious, and that also at the same time have a sense that their anxiety does give them a little bit of an edge, that saying only the paranoid survive, right?
Yeah.
And so I built my practice working with a lot of really anxious people, and one of the things that I discovered was really helpful for them to learn is that the healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. And that helped them a lot, because otherwise, what was happening is they would come to my practice and say, Dr. Clay, help me how to get rid of my anxiety. But they had a little part of themselves that didn't really wanna let go of the anxiety because they had a sense that it was on some level driving them.
Useful too. Yeah.
Yeah, and so I felt like they're just for what I think one of the reasons my practice grew so quickly and became very successful is because I was one of the only psychologists that was really helping people to straddle that line of saying, "Okay, like, yeah, we don't wanna have anxiety run our lives, but at the same time, a little anxiety is okay." It's almost like if, like, a ridiculously underweight anorexic comes in for help, she there's a part of her that's afraid to get well because she's afraid it means that she's gonna, like, blow up and get super fat like a balloon. But when you can teach her to say, "No, no, you can eat normally, and it doesn't mean you're gonna get fat. You can even still be very slim. You're just gonna learn how to, like, manage your food instead of the food managing you." And so the same sort of thing happened, I think, with the anxiety. And so, anyway, my practice was doing really, really well with that. And somebody, to be honest, it's like a silly story. Somebody was like, "Chloe, the next step in your career path is that you need to write a book." And I was like, "Okay, what should it be about?" And they said, "Well, what do you always talk to clients about?" And I said, "The whole healthy function of anxiety thing." And they said, "Okay, well, what are the techniques that you explain?" And so I put in, say, the 9 most, popular techniques, and the book did really well. It's in 5 languages now. And it got an endorsement by Deepak Chopra, so it's a great book, but my new book, it really was more of a passion project. My first book I knew was gonna, be very widely marketable because everybody has anxiety and it's, like, not a controversial topic. But my new book, which I think you have on screen right now if I'm
I
seeing
do.
correctly, um, that one got me dropped by my big publisher. It got me dropped by my fancy literary agent. And I knew oddly enough, that it was gonna be controversial to try to talk about the mental health benefits of free speech. I think that's because my profession leans literally 90% plus to the left, and for
Mhm.
whatever reason, free speech is currently coded as a right-wing issue, and so there's just not many psychologists talking about it, which is frankly why I think we need to talk about it because otherwise the narrative from psychologists seems to be let's put speech codes on because we need to tamp down hate speech and bullying and that will be better. We'll work on safe spaces for everybody and that will be psychologically good for us. And I think the opposite. And I think that a lot of my profession has got blinders on from like political foggers or something. And so I'm
Yeah.
trying to pierce through that.
So, yeah, the book is called "Can I Say That? Why Free Speech Matters." So, I want to know. You said that you talked about the psychological benefits. I am a free speech absolutist, and I have never felt so free. But I don't really like know if that's just like a me thing or what. So, what can you say about that? Because what the thing is, we want to talk about on this channel. Our goal is to discuss men's issues, and that means, first of all, that is already a bit of a taboo subject, which we don't think it should be. Kind of like in the same way that free speech is considered a taboo subject, even though we don't think it should be. And that means that we have to constantly, I guess, like fight against, censorship or suppression or dismissal. And heck, I mean, in earlier this year, a man was murdered for speech. And when we saw that, I mean, I wasn't that surprised because I know that censorship tends to be a precursor to murder because if it doesn't stop someone, eventually they'll take extreme measures to silence you. And I know that's a dark thing to talk about, but
Mm.
I think it's true. But I'm curious about what the like what does your book say, or in short? And I suggest you guys check it out. I put links in the description to all of your to your website as well as your book,
Thank
about what the like why free speech is beneficial to us.
Yes, well, I mean, you said so many important things
I
there.
know, I know, I do
No,
that.
yeah, I mean, I love that. And so I was just jotting down some notes as you were talking because I wanted to like make sure I really capture on all of that. But yeah, so first of all, I totally agree with you that we literally, well, maybe not literally, it's virtually set the table for violence when we when we when we tamp down on speech, when we don't allow people to talk, which is the opposite of what the left thinks is going to happen, right? They think that by putting on speech codes, we will reduce hate speech and bullying and have this kinder, gentler society. Or at least that's what they say they think. Who knows if that's really what they think? It could just all be like a just strategic method to control people wrapped in flowery language. Like,
Hmm.
but like if I take them at their word, it's with a well-intentioned goal. But yeah, I mean, when we can't use words to solve our problems, we're more likely to bottle up our problems and then act them out
Action.
with violence, yeah, or just other more socially hostile behaviors than, just simply having a heated exchange with somebody. So I just wanted to mention that I think it's really important that, for example, the same group of people, which is happens to be people who identify as very liberal, I discuss this in my book, they're statistically more likely to do what I call the 5 Ds, which is to defriend on social media, distance or drop contact in real life, disinvite a speaker, or decline to date across the aisle. They are also the same group of people is 2 to 8 times more likely to endorse political violence. And I really think that those two things are related. So, Charlie Kirk always said, when people stop talking, like that's when we're going to have the violence. And I really agree with that. Um, it's I think it also has to do with, we talked earlier a little bit, I think, about the feminization of psychology. And it's interesting that with women, the need for power is often expressed through nurturing. So we mask it as a nurturing behavior, like, oh, have another bite of soup, dear. Oh, I organized all your drawers for you. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
and
It's like there's a character on Harry Potter that I often bring up that was like a more terrifying villain than Voldemort. It was that woman. I can't remember her name, but she was very like motherly and nurturing and like nice and sweet, but really controlling. Like
Mhm,
and um yeah, I didn't read those books, but I saw the movies once, so that stuck
mhm.
in my mind. Have you ever read, speaking of the feminization, are you familiar with Helen Andrews? I assume that you know about her. She was doing the rounds a while ago. She wrote an essay. I want to say it was on her Substack, but it might have been on a website. It was called The Great Feminization, and she was talking about how women entering, like basically talking about the challenges of the sort of unforeseen consequences of women entering the workforce and how they have altered the entire like dynamic, the social dynamics of the workplace. Have you seen this?
I think I have seen her, like, on YouTube and things like that,
Hmm.
and I love that, and I feel like even just the conversation that we're having now is an example of, the mental health benefits of free speech. So, what you and I are saying even would be unsayable in most, academic circles, right? And
Absolutely.
so there's 3 main benefits, mental health benefits to free speech. There's cognitive, emotional, and social. And on the cognitive side, it's really through language. It's one of those things that's so natural. It's like breathing. We don't even think about it. It's truly a natural, innate human process. Language, even more so specific to humans. Other animals have interesting sound patterns they make, but we're the only ones that use symbolic language that can even convey abstract ideas and thoughts and whatnot.
Hmm.
And so it gives us this incredible cognitive tool that we can not only exchange information rapidly, we can apply systems of logic like if then statements and,
Yes.
all this, history narrative type stuff. And
Yes.
so when we suppress language and dialogue, we really start messing with our cognitive abilities, just the same way that if you cut off a few of your fingers, it would interfere with your ability to use your hand as nature intended it. And so when we start, you know, essentially slicing out and removing parts of our dialogue, our, parts of our, rational capacity for reality to notice and process information because it's taboo, we're interfering with our ability to process that information. And that is then how we end up with these ridiculous scenarios, of like, um, many academic departments where it's 90% female, but they're still recruiting women into the profession for the sake of diversity, but they're
Yes.
not recruiting men for the sake of diversity, or there's no men's affinity group, even though men are a minority. And they used to say, well, we need a women's affinity group because of women being a minority or whatever. So yeah, that's just one example of like even just how the conversation that we're having, if some of the things we're saying felt unsayable to me for many years.
Yeah, and speech, like if you can't speak freely, it's like I guess what how I say it is, it makes it to where you can't really think without being able to speak, especially to someone else. So if I have ideas or thoughts or whatever, a theory on something, but I can't share it with someone in an earnest and in let's say stoic way, that's sort of like emotionally divorced from whatever might whatever baggage it may have, but you're just trying to look at it for what it is. I can only do that if I'm exchanging that idea with someone else who is also interested in it in the same for the same reason, so don't have to worry about like how I choose my words, or if I have to like make any like land acknowledgments, as we like to say, where before you start talking about men, I have to start by saying we all understand that women have problems too, blah blah blah. That just eats up time and it's kind of exhausting, and it makes it harder for me to just focus on the thing that I'm trying to talk about. And I think that if you can't speak freely, it makes it hard to think freely.
Totally. And, again, I'm almost embarrassed to mention psychology studies because I feel like it's such a crock in so many ways. But like the studies I cite in my book, many of them are like older, like decades ago, before my, profession became so corrupted and distorted and falsified. But to your point there about the importance of being able to discuss things in a rational manner, there's a lot of studies, again, almost stating the obvious, that it really boosts our problem solving skills. That there's been a lot of studies done where they give people problems to solve, and they have to either solve them alone, or they solve them with a partner, or they solve them even just alone, but they have to verbalize to somebody else like what they're doing along the way and give a little presentation about the issue. And the people who are given the direction to verbalize about it, they tend to, create more and better solutions that, than the people who are forced to do it in isolation or without talking. Because again, it's just one of our most innate tools. We have specific regions of our brain that are devoted to the production and the comprehension of language. I mean, just to keep it even the focus on men's issues, this really came up strong with that ridiculous believe all women, Me Too world, right? So that's back when I was a little bit still in the closet about being like a real person with real thoughts. And so the
Yeah.
media would call me for my thoughts about the Me Too situation. And I never said anything I thought was untrue. So I would give them the comment that they wanted about, how, of course, sexual harassment is bad, blah, blah, blah. But I would never say to them the part that I knew that they didn't want to hear, which is that, of course, women also sometimes lie. Women can make stuff up. I've sat with women in my office that have told me very calculatingly that they plan to make up an allegation for, personal gain. I've worked with men that have been the victims of that. But when nobody could say it, it was almost like an emperor has no clothes thing. People were making all these ridiculous, irrational decisions, and men's lives were being ruined because nobody wanted to say, "Hey, wait a minute, believe all women doesn't actually make sense," right? Like it just
Hmm.
doesn't make sense. And so when people can't speak freely, they do what we call repression and suppression, and they go into denial. They start really dissociating with even their true rational mind. It's how we end up in groupthink and things like that. So I do think there's a lot of overlap with some of the issues that have been impacting men.
Yeah.
And especially when women are the ones who are controlling speech in the name of their quote compassion or their nurturing behavior, but
Yeah.
yet they're the ones who are like setting all the speech rules.
Yes, yes. So, it sounds like you would probably be a bit of like a misfit in the psychological community. Have you had like, are you like, I don't know, like, do you have any issues with? Because I'm not sure how that field works. Like, I don't know if it's a club and you get kicked out, or you don't have as much access. Like, has your position sort of made your
Mm.
career more difficult?
Yeah, I mean, yes and no. So, I mean, in the obvious, predictable ways, yes. But I firmly believe, again, that free speech is good for mental health, and one of the reasons is because it also creates greater social authenticity, and relationships become more real. And I can tell you some stories about where I've been uninvited to the barbecue. It's in fact, in particular, around men's rights. But the relationships that I have retained or even found through speaking out have been so much richer and, like, more real than
Yes.
anything I had before. But just as an example, I was speaking for a group called Families Advocating for Campus Equality. They work with young men that have been falsely accused of sexual misconduct. This was back, before they finally restored a little bit of sanity to Title IX. Like, up until pretty recently, a girl could just say a man raped her on campus, and the man could just be automatically expelled, by nothing but like a kangaroo court of a bunch of professors without
Hmm.
ever a police report ever being filed. And so I was gonna go speak for FACE, Families Advocating for Campus Equality, and they asked me not to publicize it because they were so used to, like, people trying to, like, trash, and destroy their conventions. So I didn't mention it to anybody, but I wrote into a listserv for psychologists, a very big and prominent one, and I just said, "Hey, I'm looking into research about false allegations of sexual misconduct and wondering," asked a few questions about it within, like, literally an hour, somebody wrote in with a flyer from this event, which I didn't even know that there was a flyer, but they were like, "This is what Dr. Carmichael's asking. I suggest none of us should try to help her with this, awful project." And like, it was from there, it was like this huge pile on. You would have thought I was asking people like I'm going to a puppy kicking convention. Can someone like it was insane. And so I then
Yeah.
went and spoke. And then afterwards, at the convention, I met with young men that all of them had the same story. It was heartbreaking that they'd been accused, falsely accused. They went to a therapist to try to regain their life back. The therapist in session would accuse them again and say, maybe you just don't know what rape is, or maybe you're not
Yes.
being honest.
I was just gonna ask you about that. If that like, this is why men don't seek therapy a lot of the time. Like, there's a lot of talk about why aren't men seeking therapy? Women are seeking therapy. I'm not even sure that it's helping women. And it's stuff like this because they go in and they're already the bad guy. But I'm sorry.
Totally.
Go ahead and finish your story.
No, no, totally. I'm glad you jumped in because I mean, again, the benefits to me of true dialogue is we can resonate together.
Hmm.
But yeah, so after I was like, I was blown away at the experiences of these men. And so again, somewhat foolishly, this is years ago before I really fully understood like what I was dealing with my profession. So I then wrote into this listserv again, and usually many therapists are very hungry for clients. Many of them don't have very good business skills, and they jump at the chance for referrals. So I wrote and I was like, "Hey, this organization like really needs therapists that are willing and able to help young men that have been falsely accused of sexual misconduct. Would anyone be interested in being on their referrals list?" And every time in the past that I tried to offer a referral for other reasons, I literally would get dozens of people trying to clamor for that referral. I got 0 on this one. I mean, again, it was just I think you're right though too. I don't think that my profession is really helping women that much either by just validating everything they say and telling them that they're a victim and all this other stuff. But
Exactly.
yeah, but it was amazing to see like the way that my industry treated these young men. because can you imagine the reverse? Like a therapist accusing a rape victim of like, well, maybe you're confused, honey. Maybe you wanted it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah,
Like
yeah.
it was like I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, it is wild. And I noticed that you brought up multiple times that there's a lack of spaces for men to like have discussions. And one of the things that I like, we all in HBR, we have like our specific focus, and I have my thing that I'm most concerned with, and I think is the most crucial, is one, restoring fathers, the rightful place in the home. And there's a lot of talk about deadbeat dads and stuff, but I think that it's likely, and again, we don't have data because no one has thought to do a study on it, but I would bet that most men who want to be involved, and they are excluded from their kids by their mother because there's incentives in place to essentially make it to where the mother doesn't need the father around, like they get paid by the state, and they're encouraged to continue to live like the life of a single woman even if they have children. And I think that that's damaging the children, but I'm getting a little bit off. But fatherhood is like a big, 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 big thing for me. And then right after that is that men need spaces where they can be with other men. Like I think that for most of our history, men spent a lot of their time with other men, and women spent a lot of their time with other women. Now, I'm not saying that we have to go back to that, because I think that people just being allowed to freely associate with whoever they want is optimal, right? Then they can figure out what it is that they need. But we don't allow men to do this. Every time men gather, whether it's in a real place or online or something, there's always this this narrative that problematizes that. If they're
Mhm.
in sports, there's, they talk about locker room talk, and these are all little ways that they like break that up, right? Like, the men need to be monitored. If they're online, there's concerns that they're going to be radicalized, and all of it is specifically so that men don't talk to each other and exchange ideas and have conversations. And I think this goes back to kind of like looking at the other side of what we were talking about with the way that women communicate. I think that there is some value in the way that women communicate, because it is to build, let's say, they create the social boundaries when they communicate with each other. It's like this, this is what we're going for. And this is like, I want to create a comfortable space for women. And I think that there's probably, it's inherited from ancient traditions of like raising children and stuff like that and building community. But men need something like that as well, and they don't have that. Like, whenever they do, again, like I said before, we problematize it, we criminalize it, and we like there's like asks, there are requests to have it be monitored, have it be censored, have them be broken up. And I think it isolates them, it atomizes them from other men. And the only thing, and you think about it, if you're a boy, and I know I'm going on for a little bit here.
No, I love it.
If you're a boy, okay, you're born into the world, and maybe, and this is just like as an aside, maybe you get circumcised, which I'm also against. First thing that happens is like a physical act of trauma. Then you are growing up around there's a pretty good chance that you only know your mother, you don't know your father. Then you go to school and you're surrounded by women, because they're most of the teachers. A lot of men can't get teaching jobs because, again, we have criminalized men. If they want to work with children, we immediately act suspicious, like there's something wrong with him, he's going to do something, even though there's a lot of women that rape boys in school, and girls, by the way. But they're surrounded by girls and women when they get into school, when they go to high school. They can't, they're sort of kept away. And especially this young generation now, after what happened during COVID, they're even more like isolated. They're masked, they have to stay at home, they take classes at home, whatever. And then they grow up, and we're still jumping down their throat because they haven't made enough money to attract a mate, even though we're giving all of the preferential education to women and girls. We're still acting like girls are behind, that there's not enough in STEM, there's not enough in CEOs, there's not enough in politics, there's not enough in law, there's not enough in the courts, whatever it is, right? And these boys are growing up in this world, which is extremely feminized, and it's making them like confused because they don't know what it means to be a man. So they're trying to figure that out. They feel, I think that they're experiencing mental health problems that people are not only not talking about because they haven't decided to like look into it, but they don't have a solution for, because most of the mainstream psychological help is not engineered to help men as they are. It sees them as a problem, right? As opposed to having problems. So when they do become, let's say, dysfunctional as a result, instead of looking inward and saying, well, how did we contribute to this problem? It's just, oh, this is what men are. So it's almost like they create the problem and then they point to the men as the problem when that actually manifests, which usually doesn't. I'm sorry, I went on a long thing, but I mean, I don't know what you think about that.
No, no, I thought you again were just layered in there. I was making some notes as you spoke just so I could try to like really keep up with you because I think you said a lot of really important things there. I think you're right that when men, gather in their spaces or their private spaces or whatever, it is almost always viewed in a pejorative manner, like, oh, it's the manosphere, it's bro culture, it's the boys club, it's you know what I mean? Like, whereas with again, it's that celebration paradox, but, if women do it, it's like, "Oh, well, it's women's spaces," or
The
even
sisterhood.
explicitly, like, free of men, like, as if, like, it's better
Yeah.
for
It's Sex in the
sanitized.
City, right? Yeah.
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 So I think you're right, just even the labels there say a lot, and you also pointed out importantly too, legally, like, it truly still baffles me, and I still do a fair amount of corporate speaking, and I've in the spirit of my book, I've just decided to, like I wanna say as a sidebar, my goal is not to say we should have no filter, so it's not as if I'm saying I now have no filter, but my goal is to say that we should be a little bit more outspoken about things that are important to us on a values level. And so therefore, even though I've been a little nervous about it when I'm speaking on this topic, even in corporate settings where I know they probably do have a women's committee, but not a men's committee, I'll still bring that up. I'll be like, like there's things that we feel we can't say. Like, why do we have a women's committee, but not a men's committee? And it's been interesting to see that even despite that, HR has still been like inviting me back, which has been like a little bit of a surprise. It's been a little weird, but
Mm.
so maybe things are opening up. But I just wanted to go back to what you also said there, because again, you said so many, I think, important things. You talked about too that when women, do gather, what that's like. And I can't tell you how often, unfortunately, when women do gather, phrases like, well, men are pigs or whatever, like that kind of thing can be said. And it's it's
So you're saying when women gather, there's like they start ragging on the men in their lives, complaining about men in general, that kind of
Y
thing?
they often do, not everywhere, like, and
Yeah.
I'm so pleased to say we recently relocated to Florida, and I'm homeschooling, and I've, connected with a group that specifically describes itself as conservative Christian homeschooling families, and it's been so wonderful when I'm with the wives there. If they talk about their husbands, it's in a positive way to say how much they appreciate their husbands and whatever. Like, not to say everybody's marriage is perfect, but there's a love and a respect for men that isn't I hadn't found to be present in, women's networking groups in New York where I was
Yeah.
before, for example. And so, yeah, I wanted to say, to your point that when men gather, it's often viewed with these pejorative labels like manosphere or bro culture or whatever, but that when women gather, it's not only viewed as positive, but then even within the group, there's a lot of negativity about men. Whereas if men were to gather and say, like, kind of like blow off some verbal steam about women, they could be totally like labeled as misogynists or something. And yeah, again, to the unsayable stuff, like, I'm sure you know this and your listeners probably know this too, but, there's an intelligence bell curve that's different for men and for women. So we men and women have the same average levels of intelligence, but the bell curve for women is that there's a whole bunch of average intelligent women and a very small amount of very, very smart women and a very, very small amount of very stupid women. And there's, as far as men goes, it's not quite as many in the average. And there's a lot of super genius guys and a lot of, maybe not so smart guys, but the intelligence distribution is different. And one of the things nobody wants to talk about then in specific is the fact that there are a lot more male geniuses than women. And so then, for example, like if we're going to talk about, well, why are all the CEOs men or whatever? It always has to be about sexism. Nobody can ever say, maybe it has to do with the fact that that's a job that requires an incredible level of intelligence.
Hmm.
And there are a lot more really intelligent men out there. And so, like, but nobody can talk about that. Or even for me as a woman, um, I have an incredible amount of education, and I have built businesses that have been much more successful than the average business of men or women. I'm just saying that just as a statistical fact. But I when I became a mom, it was always like my secret desire, you know what I mean? And now that I am a mom, frankly, I have almost 0 employees now at this point. I barely work at all, and I'm so thankful that my husband, provides for our family. And again, it's weird to me that it has felt almost like some kind of a dirty secret, and it hurts both men and women because I've talked to men as well where they get smeared if they have a desire to, like, take care of a woman and they'd like her to stay home with the kids. It's like they're viewed as a misogynist.
Hmm.
And on the same time, it makes it feel like some dirty secret for women to say, like, that they want to, like, be a mom and to stay home. It's like, "Well, what's wrong with you?" Or, I don't know. I know I'm going way off
Yeah.
topic here, but
No, it's
again,
okay.
it's just to me, again, it's an example of these incredible cognitive and emotional benefits of free speech, is that just by speaking candidly, it can be such a stimulating and interesting conversation.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and what you're saying about men wanting to, like something I guess that people would frame as more traditional. I think it's just normal, but that men would say, I'd like to basically work and have like I see my family as my highest priority. There was a study that was done, I guess it was a poll really, and who knows with polls, you don't know how accurate they are, but I think it seems like it's probably very correct, which looked at what liberal men and liberal women wanted, like in terms of like a list of the top 10 most important, things that they're after. And then it also had like what they call conservative men and conservative women. And
Mhm.
with the conservative men and the liberal men, the for the conservative men, the number one thing was a family. Like that was their number one goal. Like that's what they want, right? And then after that, it was like a wife, and then after that, it was like a good job, so they can like a stable, so they have like a steady paycheck. Essentially, the thing that's going to support the other two things, right? And with liberal men, I think it was like children was like number two. So what's interesting is that there's a lot of talk about the political divide in terms of like oh, Gen Z is this and that, but I think men are basically not changed that much in terms of what they want. I think even liberal men, they just have more of a, let's say, an egalitarian worldview, but they still want the normal stuff, and they're working within this kind of let's say feminist paradigm of supporting women, whatever it is that they want to do, because they don't want to be called sexist. That's ultimately what a lot of this um, boils down to. Why people are controlling their speech, why speaking freely is so important, is that people are so afraid of being seen as bigots that it already does the good job of like controlling their language right at the outset. But I just wanted to like support what you were saying about what men want. I think that most men, that's it. Like, and they're trying to navigate a minefield of like, what do I say, how much should I have, how tall should I be, etc. But it's also like, is she gonna think that I'm a misogynist because I want children? Like, not even necessarily the stay-at-home mom thing. Like, maybe they'll be willing to work with you and whatever. I mean, in this economy, that's not exactly like let's say it could be seen as not viable depending on where you are. but
Mhm.
um but I think that men having preferences is basically a problem for them.
Yeah, I saw that poll as well, and, specifically, it was male and female Trump voters versus Harris
Yeah,
voters.
Harris
Yeah.
voters, yeah.
Yeah, and, it's interesting, again, because as you said, the Harris voting women had put having children as, like, literally last or,
I think
something like
abortion was, like, higher up. Like,
yeah, of,
yeah.
like, what was it what they wanted, and that is the same group of people that ranks the highest in terms of self-reported mental illness, like
Mm,
depression and anxiety and whatnot. So, again, coming back to my book, but, like, no, I wrote the book because in my opinion, this is such a live topic for me, it's something I just think about a lot. And having worked as a psychologist in New York City for 20 years, I worked with a lot of young liberal women who like to see psychologists. It's kind of the vogue normal thing to do there. And th- I believe that they truly felt like it was unsayable to say that they wanted to have children or to say that they wanted to stay home or whatever the case may be. And I again think that when they have to push that down so much because again, it's like saying you want to kick puppies or something. They when you dissociate and push down so far what you really want, of course it's gonna manifest as depression. It's gonna manifest as anxiety because they've had to push down. I don't believe that they really truly don't care about wanting children. I believe that they've been told that so much and unable to say it so much that
yeah,
they've disconnected with what they really want. And so therefore, the more they climb the corporate ladder or, go to abortion right rallies or whatever, the deeper and lonelier sadness is being cultivated on the inside. Because when we can't be conscious and talk about what we really think and want, we're powerless to act on it to achieve it. And a sense of helplessness is actually one of the hallmark symptoms of depression. And again, the healthy function of anxiety is to stimulate preparation behaviors. So if you can't be conscious and say what you really want because it's not politically correct, of course it's a recipe for depression and anxiety, which is what young liberal women are, by self-report, most depressed and anxious group of people.
mhm, mhm. Yeah, and, they're trying to, like, have 2 things at once, like, there's, like, what they actually desire, and then there's what they're told they should desire, and they don't want because they're more agreeable, they don't wanna rock the boat on that front, so they kind of try to talk themselves into, doing the girl boss thing and holding off on, like, what they kind of want because they were told that it's bad. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. And then of course the men who want that stuff are bad too, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah, and
yeah.
then those guys just get told that to their face that they're just bad.
Yeah.
But so you talk other than like not getting invited to the barbecue, what did you ever like feel, I don't know, like your I guess because you kind of like start your own company, you didn't have to worry about getting fired or anything like that. But did you ever worry that there was going to be more severe consequences to the things that you were saying? Did you have any issues with the sort of like community?
Yeah, I mean, as you said, having my own company was a big help, which is interesting too. Like people talk about, well, why has academia been taken over, by liberals? And there's many reasons, but I think one reason is that also conservative or independent people are so much more likely to be entrepreneurs. So if you look at like successful small businesses and entrepreneurs, a lot of them, are not started by liberals, right? So yeah, I think that having my own like I knew even before I went to school that my whole reason I didn't finish college till I was 29 and then went on to get a PhD right after that. But the only reason I went back to school in the first place was because I wanted to have my own business as a psychologist. But, so I did avoid a lot of those problems. However, I had to go through many years of training within, hospital and academic environments, and I did get into hot water, like, pretty much all the time until I learned to just, smile and nod,
Mhm.
and get through that way. But Anyway, I do feel, Brian, like I could talk to you all day. I know we're coming up on our time, but
Yeah.
I love that we've been able to have this conversation. And I want to have to be able to say really quickly again before I, lose people that if they take nothing else away from today, that free speech is good for mental health. Don't write off all mental health and psychologists just because, so much of our field is so crazy. Even before psychologists came along, we had a brain that had a part of it that was devoted to the production and comprehension of speech and language that predates the existence or the concept of psychologists. And so, if anyone ever tries to put on a speech code to you to like tamp down hate speech and bullying or to create safe space or mental health for other people, I want people to answer back and say, no, wait a minute. Free speech is good for mental health. It's good for us cognitively, emotionally, and socially. And this book will tell you all the reasons why, as well as techniques on how to speak up, as well as techniques on how to listen when other people are saying stuff that's triggering, because I've been on that side of the equation too, where people are making me mad and I find it hard to listen. And so there's both parts are important for dialogue.
All right. Well, thank you, Chloe. I really appreciate this conversation. I could talk for hours about this kind of stuff with you, and I'm really glad that you came on, and appreciate your company. I did get a Rumble rant. I'm going to read it out because we always read them. It is a question directed at you, but I know that we got to take off after this, so I'll just read it out really quick.
Yeah.
NovaFan21 gives us $1 and says, at Dr. Chloe Carmichael, have you heard of stories of women, especially feminist women, falsely accusing each other only for someone to redirect the blame to men because of patriarchy? Um, I mean, yeah, if you want to say anything about that, you can, if you've heard of
Falsely
that or not.
accusing each other of what?
I guess of anything, I suppose, and then redirect the blame to men. I don't know.
Yeah, well, I
Um,
do think redirect the blame to men is pretty much a feminist, go-to no matter what. All roads
yeah,
lead to redirect the blame to men. So if I
yeah.
understand the question correctly, then yes.
All right. Well, I'll just make one last, give one last thought. I'd like to see a conversation about how do we, like, in the last 5 years, I've lost a lot of friends because of my views, because of things I've said, things that have happened, and I'm always open to techniques on how to invite them to speak freely so they can feel as free as I am, because I think they're still operating in that under that like shadow of, I don't know if it's censorship is the right word, but it's political correctness, that that discomfort. I wonder if there's like psychological phenomenon or something that can be done in that department that's sort of related to this. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, so I wish we had more time to delve into it, but I would say to a certain degree, um, if someone's truly going to walk away from you over something that you've said, I wouldn't think of it necessarily as losing a friendship as much as potentially exposing a false friendship, which
Yeah.
is, not such a bad thing to discover that, somebody really it really wasn't, and like a true safe space, a true friendship is one where people can disagree, and that's okay. And if that wasn't really the case, then maybe it wasn't really truly a friendship. Um, but I do think it's, I mean, I think it's important to let people know that you want them to be able to disagree with you, and
Hmm.
and that you wanna be able to speak your piece too, and, it's kind of a cheesy psychology term, but we call it narrating your experience, which is just taking your internal life and, trying to put it into words for other people to understand. So, if you're broaching a topic that you know is sensitive and you feel like, "Boy, this is the part where sometimes people get angry in a huff and walk away," you might preface it by saying, "Hey, look, it's really important to me when I respect someone enough to like be real with them. I want to be able to share what I really think about stuff, even if we disagree. And I really want you to be able to do the same. And so I just want to say, like, I've had this topic, become sticky with people before, but I really want to be able to be authentic with you and vice versa. So I want to share it with you. And I really want to know what you really think about it. And I hope that's okay. And if the person says yes, then great. And if they say no or they get really weird before you've even said anything, I feel like that can be saying a lot. And then one more quick technique this one's from couples therapy, but I think it works in many other situations too, where to make sure we're not talking past each other. Because when we get upset, our heart rate, if it goes above 100 beats per minute, we're cognitively not processing what the other person says. This is why people have to practice fire drill exits, because in a moment of panic, they forget how to exit the building, right? So what you do is, person A like says their piece, and then person B just repeats it back is says, okay, before I just want to repeat, you believe A, B, and C for reasons X, Y, and Z. Is that right? And then person A either confirms or clarifies. And then you switch hats, and person B will say, well, I actually feel this way about the issue for reasons D, E, and F. And then person A is like, okay, so you're saying you believe, and just recaps it. And that simple structure makes sure that people, again, are not talking past each other or failing to truly understand each other. It removes a lot of the power dynamics of like people talking over each other. And it just gives a little bit of structure to make sure that everyone's really actually putting their thoughts on the table and being heard.
Yeah, very well said. I like that. I'm gonna think about that. I'm gonna remember that. All right. So sorry this went over, Chloe, but I appreciate you coming on. Hopefully we'll have you on again sometime. We can talk about some other things. I don't know what you think about that, but I had a great time. Good.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Me too. Take care.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you. All right. Well, let me just wrap the show up here. Thanks, guys, for coming on the show. Thank you for the lively conversations you guys are having in the chat there. If you guys like this video, please hit like, subscribe if you're not already subscribed, hit the bell for notifications, leave us a comment. Let us know what you guys think about what we talked about in the show today. And please, please, please share this video, because sharing is caring. You'll find links to all of Chloe's books in the description and her website. So, check those out, please. And thanks, guys, so much for coming on today's episode of the Fireside Chat. And we'll talk to you guys in the next one.
Men's right activists are machines, dude. Okay? They are literal machines. They are talking point machines. They are impossible to fucking deal with, especially if you have like a couple dudes who have good memory on top of that too. Holy shit, you're fucked.